Welcome to Lesson 3, Collaborating to Develop Effective Programs. I think the field of autism draws controversy and a certain amount of sensationalism quite often, and there's always, news media, Dateline NBC, people touting, here's the cure for autism, and I've been in this field for almost 30 years, and truthfully, we're just now starting to understand all of the complexities of this disorder. So decisions about education and intervention with children with ASD is always very controversial. And the thing that I really want you to keep in mind is that there is no one right program for every child with autism. Just like there's no one right program for any individual with cancer. Those things have to be looked at by what the individual brings to you, what the family's beliefs are, what the vision is. All of those things together form the basis of our intervention. Not to ally autism with cancer, but anytime we're treating something that's very, very complex, especially when we're treating things that are behaviorally complex and changing with the environment, we have to be realistic and realize that we as educational professionals have to be good consumers of the literature and apply that to the individual situation as it is appropriate. So the National Research Council in 2001 agrees with that and says, we need to look at therapy as an eclectic approach. Look at what science brings to us and match that with the individual situation. The National Activity Report recently released also supports this. So no one therapy approach meets the needs of all children with autism. We have a really nice place to go for some evidence-based information recently released in 2009, and this was the first time we really got some guidance here since the National Research Council in 2001. The National Standards Project reviewed treatment literature that targets one of the core characteristics of ASD in the literature published between 1957 and the fall of 2007. One of the really nice things about the National Standards Project is they developed a method to really investigate the literature both in group experimental studies and in single case studies, which was not done in the National Research Council's report. And I think this is really important because much of what we need to learn from the literature in children with autism happens in those single case studies. Now, what we know about single case studies is that you can't take what happened with one child and generalize it to all children with autism. That doesn't make sense. Although that happens frequently, doesn't it? When a celebrity has a child with autism and says, oh, this fixed my child, and all of a sudden, those clinics and she's out on talk shows or he's out on talk shows selling it to everyone. Well, that's similar to a single case study being applied to all people. And we would never do that in research circles, but because someone is a celebrity, sometimes people end up doing that in popular culture. So back to the National Standards Project, that's a little soapbox of mine. It includes both group and single case studies, and I've included the link, and I've also included a copy of it in this week's assignments. And it took all of those studies and it aggregated all of the intervention studies for different types of intervention and categorized those into different categories: established, emerging, unestablished, ineffective, or harmful. Now, it's really important to know the study and the literature in order to interpret categories correctly, because interventions may be in a category for totally different reasons. So you can't just take this information on the surface. So in order to be in the established category, the intervention had to have several published peer-reviewed studies, and on their scientific merit rating scale, they had to have scores of a 3, 4, or 5, and it looked at design, independent variables, dependent variables, the diagnostics used, and the generalization. So these interventions in the established category got a 3, 4, or 5 on their scientific merit rating scale and were found to be beneficial in the treatment of a specific target that they designated. So it doesn't mean that we all agree that increasing whatever they increased or decreasing whatever they decreased is important, but what it means is what they set out to either increase or decrease, they did, and they did it with a certain amount of scientific rigor. So in the established category, we have behavioral packages such as positive behavior support, functional communication training, applied behavior analysis, and priming. There's some other things such as antecedent behavioral packages that are in there. We have AAC, Augmentative Alternative Communication, including PECS, which is Picture Exchange Communication System. We have Joint Attention, modeling, both live modeling in vivo and video modeling. Naturalistic teaching strategies, also known as incidental teaching or milieu teaching strategies. Peer training packages, pivotal response treatment, visual schedules, self-management, and story-based packaging, which essentially in most of the literature is social stories, except for one I think was an informational story. So those are the interventions that received a scientific rating scale of 3, 4, or 5 and really did what they set out to do.